here, Professor. And I don't
I'm
always,
recording, by the way.
yeah,
I
no,
thought
that's
you're
perfect.
starting to get into some things that people need to hear.
Yeah, so here's the thing is, you know, you learn things every season in fantasy football. And, people ask me, why do I play so many leagues? Because, I know I miss out on a few details by playing so many leagues. You'll blow a lineup or whatever. But by playing more data points, you have the potential of learning much more. And I think we learned this year, beta testing our consensus between my data and your data. We arrived at a position where when I look back at the drafts, and I haven't done my detailed report yet, I will do that.
Yeah.
But when I look back just casually at the leagues that were drafted using our consensus data, and then I had a few other leagues where I drafted where I didn't use our consensus, where I used my data and, you know, logic, just my skill set of what I've done in the past. And it's impossible to know. It's like, trying to do a blind study in science and somebody's got the answer key. It's not always perfect because once you look at the six, your brain is thinking about the six. But I tried to just concentrate on my data just to do a beta test. And of course, quite frankly, using the six on every dollar league that we had out there. Like anytime I was spending money, I was using the best data available. Some of the casual leagues I was invited to, Fishbowl and football guys, I veered away from that to try a few different strategies that didn't work as well as the six. When we look at our six and teams that were drafted with that, we had no mistakes in the early rounds. Were there guys that we avoided that did better? Sure. But guys we drafted, except for injury, I didn't have a single miss in the first 4 rounds, Professor. That's unheard of. But it's because we used such a strict criteria to get to the best of the players in those early rounds, the safest upside players. And it worked. So I'm very intrigued on that going forward for the future.
That's great. I'm starting to build data sets and whatnot. I've done the targets, the touches, the snaps, and weekly fantasy points. I'm doing now. That's the bush figure data, and I'll have 2023 and 2024 done. So I'll start, and I may have calculated previous years. If I have, I'll follow that down the rat hole there. But what I'd like to do with multiple years is use one year to be predictive of the next year. In other words, trying to get that way to get a view of what's coming this, in 2025. So that when I build these year to year databases, I like to look 1 year out, 2 years out, these kind of things. And, I've done some of that and I've reported on that before. And just starting to build those data sets here uh, and just to kind of let you know what I've been doing. So, if you want to start the show after we, give comments about things, I've got some data that I was going to show from 2023 and 2024. Just one little slice, and as an example, what our listeners can begin for themselves, and I'm just going to have you and I kind of give our opinions about, and I've got the old graph, the whatnot. So I thought we ought to do that in the show and probably talk about our win-ins, Dennis. I understand you and I have added to the bankroll. So anyway, I
Yes,
think we
indeed.
can definitely hit that. And of course, we're in playoff mode. At least you are. I know you're in some leagues. You might want to hit that briefly as well. So I'm ready for the show, I think, and then
Well,
we'll.
let's jump right in, and we have an important holiday to celebrate
Oh
on this
boy.
show as well
Okay.
today.
Okay.
So here we
Let,
go.
let's do a holiday.
How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the science of fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? You get a meteorologist and a biologist together, and they're going to use the scientific method in fantasy football. What does that mean exactly? It just means that we're going to use statistics in a smarter way and in a statistic driven game like fantasy football. That means you're likely to be a winner if you pay attention to the scientific method. And I'll guarantee you, if you apply some of the principles that we talk about here on the show, you will be more successful in 2025. And joining me as he does each and every week, he is the fantasy professor. He's a real professor, emeritus. It's Dr. John Bush. John, oh, I'm telling you, I missed you last week. The voice wasn't working and we had to cancel, but boy, we're back and better than ever.
So the real reason your voice played out, you were yelling for your Chiefs all the beta team, and they got whipped, Dennis. Good thing,
Woo!
I think Andy. It's funny that people say, "Oh, the Chiefs and Andy Reid," but it takes somebody pretty confident to just say, "Look, we're going to play our beta team, and I'm going to live with that loss on my record." And Andy wants to win. Belichick wanted to win. Some of these great coaches, that's what I've seen over the years. The records and stuff come to you, but winning, this week kind of things. And the Chiefs, I guarantee you, Dennis, they are. Andy Reid is not sitting around twiddling his thumbs. He's planning and he's looking at whoever they're going to play, and he's plotting his strategy, and the other bye teams are doing the same. So that's I think we in fantasy kind of forget that you can lose the battle to win the war, and we forget that we got to win every week, Dennis. Every position. It's and we go crazy when it doesn't work. And it's the script, right? The referees. It's whatever. The part. Whatever. Whoever they're blaming this week.
Yeah, and Andy Reid's a smart guy, and in fact, one of the absolute smartest coaches in the history of professional football. And yeah, I'm biased. I'm a Chiefs fan. And oh, by the way, Professor,
What?
happy
Oh,
65 toss power trap day to you. It's a national
what?
holiday.
What?
It's
Okay.
65 toss power trap day because
I don't know what that is.
on
It
this
sounds like
date,
trying to find a possum or something. We're trapping and trying to catch 65 possums.
this date back in 1970, Super Bowl four,
Okay.
and I believe it was even played in New Orleans, but it was played outdoors in
Yeah.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
The Kansas City Chiefs
Yeah.
matriculated the ball down the field
Yeah.
against the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
And of course, the mentor, Mr. Hank Stram, the coach,
Yeah.
called the famous 65 toss power trap. He was mic'd up for NFL films that
Oh,
day, first time ever. that they had Mike to coach up for a championship game, and they picked the right guy.
Yeah.
Bud Grant on the other sideline would have been so boring.
Yeah.
But picking Hank Stram, despite the fact that they were big underdogs going into that game, and Hank Stram gave them so much in the way of great lines, from jabbering with the officials, complaining to the official, and then all of a sudden, oh, that's a great spot. You guys are doing a great job out there.
Yeah.
When it became a first down, then of course they're on a goal line play, and he sends in the play. He says 65 toss power trap. Hey, tell me what that looks like. And then the guy calls upstairs, 65 toss power trap. What does that look like here? And he sends the play in, and he says, hey, it's going to break wide open, boys. And Garrett waltzed into the end zone. And that pretty much put the game away right there in the second quarter. But happy 65 toss power trap day to all who celebrate.
Oh, okay. Like I said, I wasn't sure what all that was about there. The Saints only won one Super Bowl, so we don't have a lot of traps. We got a lot of traps. We've been caught by a lot of traps. Very few have we escaped the traps here, and it was a sad season for us Saints fans. And my jacket, Dennis, my lucky jacket, the moths are chewing on it, the mothras, and it's getting threadbare. So I'm hoping before I leave this world, going to the fantasy football championship in the sky there, that I'll get to see another run for the Lombardi trophy. But not this year, Saints. And Dennis, I'm not sure next year either. It's pretty lean out there. Kamar's 1 year older, and Olave, those injuries. Carr. I don't think Carr's the answer. So I don't know. I'm
It, it
not looking forward to next year, even already. And I know the Saints tricked me this year. They won the first two games, and everybody was talking, Saints, and I was like, no, this can't be right. Something's not right here. Do I take the blue pill or the red pill, Dennis? I wasn't, I wasn't being tricked too much. I was like, okay, I see where this is going. They're going to crush our hopes, and so that's what happened. And we'll live to fight another day. But we're always building, Dennis. I don't know what we're building for, but we're building.
it really shows the difference that a quarterback makes in real football.
Yeah.
Because, as a Chiefs fan, I lived 50 years between Super Bowls, and we had some really pathetic quarterback play. We had some good quarterback play. I mean, we had last couple of years of Montana. We had a couple of guys that would come in and do well. But this is the time that, as a Chiefs fan, I'm so spoiled that once a week I put on the ratty old Chiefs sweatshirt that I wore back in the 90s. It's got a couple of holes in it. It's a little faded out, but wearing that once a week, when I'm lounging around the house, reminds me of the lean old days, the days before Reed and before Mahomes. I mean, it's stunning to me that you got a guy in Patrick Mahomes who every year that he has been the starting quarterback for the Chiefs have played in the AFC Championship game. That's a level of being spoiled as a fan that I never imagined growing up. I don't root for the teams. I don't bandwagon jump for the great teams, okay? I stick with my guys through thick and thin. And quite frankly, as a Chiefs fan, there was more thin than thick over the years. And I remember at the beginning of the year when I predicted they would go 14-3 this year. And people said I was crazy. With that schedule, there's no way they're going to go 14-3. I was right. I was wrong. Well, I was wrong. They went 15-2. So it's being spoiled as a Chiefs fan. Now, you don't even worry about the regular season anymore. Just like Andy Reid, his whole goal is to get to the playoffs with the healthiest team he can.
Yep.
And that's a level of being spoiled that I thought was only reserved if you were a Belichick and Brady and Patriots fan. I didn't think anybody else would see that ever again. But what a joy that is. But you know, when I look at that part of the real football world, I'm just spoiled. This time of the year, I spend a lot of time looking back to learn lessons from last season in fantasy football. And I think we learned some good ones. We were talking about it a little bit on the pre-show.
Yeah.
Our idea of putting 6 different weekly value metrics, 6 different ways of measuring what a player does every week in fantasy football. Because if you haven't learned that by now, it's a weekly game. Year-end points per game, they don't matter. In fact, they can be very deceiving. It's how you get to those points on a weekly basis. We have 6 different metrics that we combined this year for the first time ever. We beta tested it. And Professor, the lessons I learned from 2024 is I want to do that more often. We won money when we combined that concept with what I think has developed into a pretty good drafting strategy with the better than zero.
I thought the better than zero really gave me some advantages. I had some, as I look back just briefly, I can see that losing Dak Prescott for me and Godwin really cost me money later, that I just could not make those up out of my 41 teams. It probably cost me 2 or 3 victories. So it cost me money, I suspect. I made money. I had 41 teams, not counting our dynasty. I made the playoffs, the finals in 7, and I won 6, Dennis. And one,
Wow.
if I would have taken Zacchaeus or Gersecki instead of Ramondre Stevenson, he was the only, I kept him in. I remember the word came out, we were doing our podcast, and he was, and I was just like, I didn't have enough time to chew through that thing, that thinking. And I would have won 7 out of 7, but 6 out of 7 put money in my pocket. I'll have more money than I can spend again. Last
Yeah.
year, you're saying, well, can't you get it? Well, I don't want to pay the taxes. Anything above $600, you got to get a W-2G. So for now, I'm going to stay under that and just let my money ride, or I might take 500 out. But I've got 28 free entries, $35 free entries, Dennis, and $2,100 roughly. And of course, I will renew our dynasty team. And thanks, by the way, I went from the basement. I pulled Dennis in. He got me to 3rd, and this year got me to 2nd. And we weren't close on 1st. That first team was
Oh,
really rocking.
yeah.
We weren't
Yeah.
going to get them, but we spanked the other two pretty good. And it's the best I've ever done. And I say I mean the best that I've been associated with. Dennis is definitely my Andy Reid for my dynasty team. Thanks, Andy. And he has his face shield that's going in the Fantasy Football Hall of Fame, I'm sure, and whatnot. So it was good times by all. And I'm toying with the idea of using some of that extra money, Dennis, and making you do a second startup dynasty. I guess I'm getting greedy, and I don't know. You really did well, but anyway, I made money. I won 6 of 7 and put 2,100 in my bankroll and 28 free $35 league.
Oh,
So I'm
that's
sorry, 28. So 28 times 35, I don't even know whatever that is.
a
It's,
lot of money.
yeah, 1,400. I don't know. It's definitely a nice little chunk. And so uh, playing about 40 leagues again, uh, 28 and then 12. So it's $300-400 out of 21, Dennis. I'm going to have money left over. Last year I had about 600. Theoretically, I'm going to have about 1,500. So I'm just sitting here with that money. Of course, they get to earn the interest on it. They should give us interest. But anyway,
Should be like a money market account.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. Give me something. Come on, give me a T-shirt or something while you're making money on my bankroll there. Anyway, Dennis, how did you do this year?
well, my total amount of money in the various fantasy football banks right now
Yeah,
is about $4,000.
sweet.
When I count the free entries over at FPPC, the cash, and I got my butt kicked in best ball this year. I did not have a good best ball season. So that's the lesson I'm going to play or choose to learn from this year is what did I do wrong in best ball? Because my strategy has always been the same in best ball. I use best ball as mock drafts. And my first 10 rounds, I draft that team as if it's a redraft team. So I don't expect to win a lot of money because your strategy does have to be different for best ball than redraft. But those cheap best ball leagues prepare me. They train the brain to do drafts. Because when you're in a draft, even if it's a long duration, long clock draft, you have to train your brain to think through all of the variables and to pick the right guys. And I found that those best ball drafts do that better than anything else. Mock drafts are a joke because so many people leave after 3 rounds. If you try to do a mock draft, they don't work. But when there's money on the line, people pay attention and they will draft smarter. So my strategy has never been to maximize my best ball bank. That's seed money for learning and to training my brain and getting ready for when there's money on the line. But I've always won money in best ball. I've always had a positive balance at the end of the year. And this year I lost money on best ball. Made up for it in dynasty, made up for it in redraft. And it's not like I'm upset that I lost money in best ball because I go in looking to break even. I didn't even break even this year. Now I didn't lose everything, but I didn't win as many best ball leagues. So I will examine that strategy and I might say, you know what? For less of those best ball leagues, I'm gonna trade my brain for redraft, but use strategy more aimed at best ball. And I'm sure that the winnings will pick up as a result. I just hope my redraft doesn't fall apart. So we'll have to worry and think that one through. But I enjoyed the FPPC way of playing fantasy football this year in redraft more than I did in other leagues. So I'm going to expand my portfolio on that side. So I'll take a league safe deduction. I'll take some money out of that account and I'll probably apply it to my FPPC account to up that. But, it's kind of nice sitting there with a bank of $4,000 when all I've ever spent to get there is a total of $600.
Yeah.
That's been my investment because I've let it ride. And I have taken out 4,000 other dollars along the way. I took out more money prior to the tax laws changing. But the last couple of years, I've just kind of let it ride and I've upped my play a little bit. But yeah, it was a good season. It wasn't a great season, but it was about just shy of $1,000 profit this year.
Yeah.
But also increased my number of leagues I was in. And I picked up so I had a strategy this year, Professor. If I drafted a new dynasty team with people from Twitter and people that I met at the expo, I also picked up an orphan. So I knew going in that I might have tough time with all those orphans. I had about 6 orphans that I added to the resume.
Yeah.
But I won cash in 2 of my 6 orphans.
Nice.
So I'm in pretty good shape there. And people, why do you play so many leagues? Well, I learn from each league. And there's also attrition every year. There's some leagues that don't renew, which when I play against people on League Safe, I play with a very short-term goal of winning money every year that I play. And I know that's impossible. You're not going to do it every year. But I'll finish top 3 in enough leagues to turn a profit, even with so many orphans. And the orphans are fun because you get to rebuild a team. And I had one orphan last year, Professor, that I picked up. I think he won 6 games all of last year. I finished second in the league this year, just making a few strategic plays and just being smarter in how I managed my players. And I won 10 games and I finished second in the league. I felt good and I cashed some money. I finished second in that league and won some money. So I love that aspect of it when you can pick up a team that wasn't very good. And, one of my free leagues, I'm disappointed that it's going by the wayside because it was a league that I joined to learn different strategies. And that team was bottom barrel, like last place, built them up to second in points this year. And I had 3 draft picks this year. And now
it's gone.
The league's folding. But there was no money in it. It was just for fun. But I treat every league the same, whether it's a cash league, whether it's a free league, a $10 league, or a $100 league. I treat them all the same. I'm always looking to improve the team and to win. But the lessons I learned from this year, every year that we've been working together, Professor, it's like I've gained about 3 years of knowledge, being able to work with you and to use the best of our ideas and put them in action. And you've given me a lot of credit on that dynasty team. And yes, I've done a good job of managing the roster, but that's a team effort. We make those lineup decisions together every week. One lesson I learned though from this year, because I'm playing an FPPC where defense and kickers matter, I'm going to apply the same concepts to kickers and defenses and see if we can gain an advantage there.
Yeah.
because there's two starting positions that we're not taking advantage of as well. And I think a little more research. We're good at streaming defenses. You are the master of streaming defenses. But maybe we could pick up when a streaming defense that looks good on paper because of the DAPs
Yeah.
is going to underperform.
Yeah.
Because we saw that a few times with teams like the Indianapolis Colts that seemed to be in good matchups for their defense.
Yeah.
It had some good weeks in the past, and then they got nothing
Yeah.
for us at the end. So a little more research will aid us, I think, going forward.
Yeah. I did want to turn to, and Dennis hasn't seen this. I will say we are in the middle of our 2025 preseason research. I urge everybody to be working on that. Get some discipline, put you some hours a week concept, time on task, some discipline there. This is the time, not laze about and, goof around. It's time to hit the research, and there's lots of places that you can get free data from. Imagine that. And let me share one place. I'm not going to share everything, but Dennis, I will start here. And this is uh, teamrankings.com. And they have tons of data here. And they have something here's their stats. And Dennis, it's crazy. And this is where I get a lot of my efficiency. But here's total offense. And look at all the fun stuff. Dennis, this is just so fun stuff. Scoring offense, look at all this fun. To me, this is very exciting, right? Very exciting. So look at all this places and things and data, more than I have studied here. And that's team stats, and I hadn't even showed player stats. So this is free to use, and it's one of the places I really like them. They have betting odds, and we'll talk about the games. So this is where I hang out at teamrankings.com, and definitely should do that. And I shared one of my sites. I'll let y'all look at that. And now let's talk about some data. Let's see here. Uh, right here, let me share this site. And okay, here. So, Dennis, I just pulled the team level yards per game 2023 2024. So, I gathered this data from team rankings, and I have two columns here 2023 yards per game at the end of the season, the grand average, and 2024. And so, first thing I do is, certainly put them down. Then, usually most people do a correlation here, Dennis, about 55, so 0.55. So that means almost half the comparisons can be explained in 2024, can be explained by 2023. Half. And you're saying, well, that doesn't sound good. I'm telling you, 0.56. I mean, obviously the best is one, right? It's exactly me. We will never see perfect. What we're trying to do is get some things to think about, framing, thinking about teams, what's going to happen for 2025, and looking back here. And so when you plot, then the blue, which by the way, I sorted in my Excel. I sorted come on, John, the 2023 here, and then looked at 2024 in the orange. So 2023 is in blue, and you see high to low. The average is red for 2024. and I think it's almost 340 yards. And again, 0.55 is interesting, but what does it tell you? So, what I do is look at the actual data. I don't get tricked by just being mesmerized by the correlation. I see some data folks and I just wonder, do they even have time to look at the data? But I do. And I made something that's very intriguing observation here. And I'm going to let Dennis kind of, he's probably been staring with his eagle eye here and seeing what he can see. But Dennis, is there interesting things that you're seeing here? And then I'll tell you what I'm going to focus on for 2025.
Yeah, there's a ton of great information here. And by the way, I haven't spent a lot of time at teamrankings.com, so
Now you will.
I will definitely because
Well,
there's
look
some
at all the data.
there's
Yeah.
some relationships that you can see. Now, the graph, okay, is one thing. I'm not really picking up a real major trend between 23 and 24 when I look at this graph. But when
Uh-huh.
I look at the charted data behind the graph,
Uh-huh.
I picked up on a couple of things right away.
Uh-huh.
So look at San Francisco, for an instance.
Yeah.
If you compare teams and look at how they did,
Mm-hmm.
plus or minus, and then
And
think,
we could calculate that,
oh,
Dennis.
yeah, and then think about what happened with that team that caused that. So they're down 20 yards. So that's about 5%. Okay.
Yeah.
Brandon Ayuk going out, CMC going out. I'm actually shocked it's not higher.
Yeah.
But what that tells me
Mm-hmm.
is that this Brock Purdy guy might be a pretty damn good quarterback after all. If I look at other teams, you can see a startling relationship because look at Washington. Look at the Washington Commanders, for instance.
Yeah.
Up 56 yards. That's huge. That's not even in the same area code as last year. This Jaden Daniels is pretty damn good, and so is this coach. And then you look at other teams. Look at Baltimore, for instance. They're getting look at what they can do with a premium running back sharing the backfield with Lamar Jackson. It's insane. And then you compare that to like Buffalo, and you see Buffalo dropped off this year without wide receivers, without guys that their quarterback could count on this season. So you see these relationships and you understand instantly, okay, this team got better because of this guy. But look at Minnesota. That's a coaching thing with that offense. They changed running backs. They changed quarterbacks. They're almost identical from one year to the next. To me, that's stunning. That tells me that they've got one hell of a coach in Minnesota who's been able to scheme up a great attack using the weapons that are at his disposal. So, this data, I'm seeing some big relationship differences between 23 and 24. Most of them make a lot of sense when you look at the injuries or you look at the player changes that a team had.
Yeah. Uh, and just if people are doing their own data, you could color code teams that improved or declined. You know, just do some simple uh, coloring of the team, and you could look at Chicago. You could put that in red. Cleveland, Jacksonville. So you can kind of just have that and stare at it for a while. So, Dennis, I'm going to circle back here. Uh, if you look at 2024 in the orange and you look around the average or above, and you see that 2023, high to low, and notice that we had some really great teams that really improved. Here's five right here: one, two, three, four, five, down to about right here. So the 21st, 22nd, even to the 24th. So you're thinking, I'm not, if they did uh, good or bad last year, it looks like it's not predictive. What jumps to me, Dennis, look at the bottom, the extreme bottom from 2023. They're still having problems in 2024. When I go back and if I've got this data, I would love to see 2022, 2021, and you can start building your database, folks, now. So in 2 or 3 years, does this trend hold? So for me, what jumped out predictive wise for 2025 is look at all these sorry teams down here. They didn't do anything. So who are the concerns? And so I was going to ask Dennis about his metrics from those teams. In other words, is there something about team structure, MVP and best, some of your data, Dennis, on some of these crappy teams? In other words, is there something deeper still with our metrics? But we're talking Vegas, Tennessee, Giants, New England, pretty much Jets and Carolina sucked 2023, and they pretty much sucked 2024 right here. So that's what really jumped out to me. So this data may actually be useful in spotting the 2025 losers. So I would be extra concerned the depth of my drafting here, Dennis. I mean, I'm not talking rookies and, upside, but just right now, these are some teams that I'm going to have some good reasons to get too deep on, in the wide receivers or the running backs. I got some real issues here, on the depth, and it may be just depth. I'm looking at Vegas, Myers, and then who kind of thing. Tennessee, Giants, New England. I mean, I see these patterns that maybe there's just the team structure is weak. You got one star player or so, and that's it. I don't know if this is a defense issue, but what it does, folks, it highlights more investigation in those teams. What is going on? So for 2025, I'm starting off pessimistic with this metric, Dennis. So do you see what I'm seeing on that then if you look at it that way?
Yeah, and what I'm seeing is a another variation of what I'm looking at with
Mm-hmm.
data.
Mm-hmm.
And this might really be the key here. These worst six teams,
Yeah.
they even if they saw some improvement,
Not
they were
much.
still in the bottom.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. Like, I don't mind having wide receivers from bad teams because they're passing a lot. And even if
Yeah.
the quarterback's not that good in a PPR league, Jacoby Myers is a heck of a piece to have
Yeah.
as a flex starter.
But after
Malik
that, where do you
Malik
go?
Neighbors was great,
Yeah. But after
but
that, where do you go?
oh, but look at the running backs
I mean, I
on
see
these
Thielen
teams.
in Carolina. Then where do you
Oof.
go?
And I don't want anything to do with the running backs. I know Chuba Hubbard had a good season, but his good season was still only RB2 level.
Yeah.
And you were getting him really cheap. There's a difference of cost of acquisition in fantasy football. I would not want to be paying a premium for any running backs
Yeah.
from the bottom six teams because the bottom six teams are having a hard time getting out of that bottom six.
Yeah.
And I want my running backs. One little nugget that I've already grabbed
Yeah.
from looking at, and I'm about halfway through the league now
Mm-hmm.
in getting my 2025 preseason rankings ready. I know it's January 11th. Hard to believe that I'd already have my first look at the data. But that's how you have to prepare in fantasy football. You have to always be looking ahead.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking ahead, there's a big difference. I mean, this is the easiest statement to make. There's a big difference between the top six and the bottom six in the NFL right now. And it shows up in a startling way with this data. And I don't want to be investing in bottom six running backs. Even Breece Hall, who is pretty darn good of a talent,
Mm-hmm.
he's being held back by being on a bottom six team. And he did not even come close to his ADP this year.
Yeah.
He didn't have an awful year. Breece Hall wasn't bad. Breece Hall, using my data, was RB13. That's not bad. But you drafted him as RB2. That's awful.
So Dennis, before I forget, I think people, once you got this table, folks, you could go to 2023 and get the RB1s
Oh, yeah.
metrics,
Yep.
the WR1s, the tight end ones for
Yep.
2020. Then you could get 2024. And so now you've expanded your database here using the total team's yards, kind of the framework. Is there an association with the RB1s, the WR1s, that kind of thing? So you start building data to look at the system. Again, we're breaking down the system. And again, I'm starting with team level, Dennis. The top down approach that I've argued is how I approach this. Again, as a biologist, when we look at animals right in the environment, we want to see what's the environment, the weather, the soil, the rainfall, the sunlight, the nutrients in the soil, the prevailing winds, the abiotic, we call it, and the biotic, right? The living and non-living. And that's why people in biology look top down a lot of times. If you're going to study earthworms, you need to understand where they're at. And so you understand the environments. And, if you're going to do your earthworm husbandry, Dennis, get you some earthworms back for fishing bait. I guess you guys use that up there in up in Yankee land here. I don't know if you catch your pikes and your muskies and your
Oh, yeah.
whatnot with worms, but down here, we get the brim and the crappie, and you can use worms and catch fish. So people sometimes will actually grow worms, believe it or not. Put a little moonshine in there, get them stirring. Make them attractive for the fish. Fish are thirsty. Put a little moonshine on that worm. See, that's a little hillbilly secret there. But back here in the hills, Dennis, food can be lean. If the possums are playing hard to get, you got to have something on the table. Just not the possum with the apple in its mouth. You gotta have something to eat. So anyway, you learn about that top down approach, Dennis, and it's practical out here in the hills in Arkansas. So
Yeah.
that was my discussion. I don't know if you want to comment on my poor jokes there, but there you go.
No, and the top down is the way to be looking at data, because you have to understand the big picture before you can understand the small pictures.
I
And it's
like
the same in meteorology. Okay. Meteorology, when you are making a forecast, say I'm making a forecast for Danville, Illinois today.
yeah,
I don't start by looking at Danville, Illinois.
yeah,
I start by looking at what's going on in the entire northern hemisphere.
yeah.
what type of a pattern do we have? And I might even go even farther of saying, okay, so where are we with solar cycles right now? Where are we with El Nino? You know, that's the water off the coast of South America, because all these things drive weather patterns. And when I see people, they look at an event, whether it's the hurricane that went up and nailed North Carolina, whether it's the wildfires that have caused all kinds of havoc out in Southern California. And when I see them say they, you know, instantly assigning blame to something, to whatever, in this case, seems to be climate change, is what they like to attach to these things. My first question is, okay, what did the big picture say? What did the models say? Because if the models that are derived for a standard atmosphere forecasted an event, then we know it's not too hinky of an event. In fantasy football or in real football, when I look at this data and I could see a correlation between team did really, really good 2 years in a row with different players. Now I'm starting to think, my goodness, that's a team that really is designed well. And even when they change parts and pieces, they have success. When I see a team add a stud player and decline in yards, that means I better investigate why that happened. And it might not be the stud player. Maybe it's the offensive line had all kinds of injuries or was lousy. But this top down approach is very key to understanding things, because without it, you tend to jump to a conclusion. And if you jump to a conclusion, you're probably going to be wrong in science.
I have nothing to say other than agree.
Yeah.
So
And that's where, you know, a lot of this stuff sits right now with me on stuff is I get really perturbed when I see scientists jump to conclusions about any event that happens in weather or the world. And I get equally perturbed in fantasy football if we jump to conclusions without analyzing the data.
uh yeah, not scientists are people too, and some people like to, you know, and put their hand up early, right? Like Arnold Horshack did, and Mr. Carter,
Yeah.
and some never want to put up their hand. They never, uh, you know, they're guarded because they know that what you think you understand can be, thrown out with more analysis. So some scientists understand that it's, everything just stays until we find it's false. And so if you approach it like that, you know, but there is treats for scientists that can jump up. They sell books, they become star scientists, they, get, industries, drug company. There's a lot of money out there, Dennis, and we're people. And, uh, it can, you can find yourself a slippery slope when you start talking. And so I'm just not who I am. And so I kind of cringe when I see some of the scientists. And no offense, but I find physicians kind of jump a little. It's like they've forgotten the science side of medicine. They're more on the practical side, and I think they forget their roots a little bit, whereas actual scientists are more dealing with falsification all the time. And, you know, but there's money, Dennis, and money makes you kind of can be crazy, and you'll say funny things. And again, politicians that are not scientists will say things and say, well, it's settled. Scientists say this. I mean, just about any issue, you can find somebody somewhere to say something that will agree with your opinion. So that doesn't impress me. I like
Yeah.
to look at top down and the context. And
Yeah. And I,
so,
I,
you
and
know,
I,
yeah, go ahead.
I drive everybody crazy in the world of meteorology and climatology because my answer is could be,
Yeah.
or that's a part of it. And they don't like that answer. They want a yes or no answer. And if you study atmospheric physics and you understand you change one part of an equation, it's going to cause other changes. And if you don't keep that in mind with everything you're saying, you'll understand that the could be's and the maybes, it's just like in fantasy football, the range of logical outcomes. That's what it's all about. It's having that range and then understanding how to react to that range versus where that player is being drafted. Because the number one player in the draft is only of value, Professor, if he finishes in the top 3 at his position. So as you go farther down the draft, you've got more room for improvement in how that player can turn out. And that's what I think a lot of folks don't realize. But you're right. There's so many scientists that will, during COVID, I was cringing because they were making assumptions quickly off of limited data. And my scientific, little warning sign went off of that something's not right here. And I understand in a crisis, you're trying to bring some comfort to the public who is not as knowledgeable on this stuff as you might be. But false hope or too much worry is not good for you either.
No, no.
And that's where I think we sometimes, we don't understand that quite often the consensus is wrong. And I don't care if it's in science, fantasy football, or picking a horse at the track. Like I've seen 1-9 shots finish out of the money.
Yeah,
Everybody
I
believes.
did the other day.
Yeah,
That was crazy.
almost everybody. Like when you're 1-9 in a field of 10 horses, for instance,
Yeah,
there's so much more money being bet on you than the rest of the field combined.
yeah,
You couldn't be more of an outlier versus the consensus by picking any other horse in the field. But they win. Like the consensus doesn't always, like it drives me crazy when I hear, oh, the consensus says this. Okay, that may be the truth right now. But in another 2 years in science, we might falsify that and understand there's a lot more going on here than we think. For instance, there was a report that came out, probably heard it, 2024, warmest year on record in the world when you average all the temperatures. And that's the truth. Is it worth getting concerned about? One of the reasons we had the warmest year is because particulate pollution is way down. So we got a good reason for being warm. We've got less of the power of the sun being reflected and not being absorbed. Is that a bad thing? Probably not. We're all breathing a little better. Yep. If there was more pollution, we wouldn't have had the hottest year on record. So when you hear things, you have to sometimes in science and in fantasy football, you got to, the top is great. You understand what's going on, but you got to drill down to find the answers of why things are happening. And sometimes the answers in science are not all negative. Sometimes it's a good thing. So, but in fantasy football, you got to understand the data. You've got to really dig to understand the data, because coming up with quick assumptions, you end up betting on that 1 to 9 shot and losing money. You've got to be smart in how you adapt each and every year in fantasy football.
My comment, and I was, when Dennis says that he's working on his 2025, I assure you folks that if his top player is the first pick, he will think about drafting if his second player is the 10th pick, right? So ADP 10 versus my 1 is the 1. I'm liking that ADP 10 because that's more value, right? And so Dennis and I and my dog, we drafted one of our teams together. We have to walk away from consensus. We see it, but it's just a guide. And so I see people already anointing, well, this is going to be the top pick next year. And, so Barkley or whoever, Lamar Jackson's going to be quarterback 1, whatever it's going to be. Dennis, it's not done until the day of your draft, the minute of your draft, and you're looking at the ADP. That is the true framework at that point. So we're going to spend all our time trying to tweak and get our data ready so we can make those final decisions. So it's not done in January by any means, but we're hoping for bargains, and so we can sit back and hope that our first pick, Dennis's, number 1 MVP quarterback, is the 5th best quarterback taken. That's gravy. We're waiting. But if not, then maybe number 2 is a value, or number 3. I mean, you've got to have that value in the equation.
And it's how you build the team too. So on
obviously,
FPPC this year, my team that finished second in one of my leagues. Okay. Now in FPPC, you finish second, you don't win much. You win a free play next year. Congratulations. Yeah. It's very top heavy to the winners, and I love that. But that team that finished second, Professor, Dak Prescott at quarterback. Yeah. The first quarterback I selected. How about Stephon Diggs and Rashee Rice?
Yeah,
as 2 of my wide receivers. And I still finished second.
Yeah.
Another, my Superflex team that won.
Yeah.
That team had Chris Godwin and Rashee Rice as 2 of my wide receivers.
Yeah.
But also had Brian Thomas.
That helped.
So yeah. So and I won. I won the league with my quarterbacks were Goff and Love.
You could do that.
So in a superflex, Goff, Love, and I had actually no, that league I had Goff and Richardson, and then I substituted in Penix for the last week, and I won the whole damn thing in a superflex with my best quarterback is Goff.
Yeah.
So you can always, and that team also had Dak Prescott. So both of my teams that finished at the top in FPPC, out of 6 teams, my first and my second place team out of my 6, they both had Dak as my top quarterback. I took Dak and Goff as my quarterbacks in a super flex and Richardson as my third guy. Didn't work out so good, but it worked out all the way to a championship because I drafted elsewhere really well. But again, Godwin and Rice on that team. I mean, Godwin, Rice, and Dak, and I still won the league. That's having a good strategy down the line. So don't get worried if your first round draft pick gets hurt. You can survive
Yes,
and
you
do
can.
well in fantasy football.
Gotcha. I got the metrics for our games this weekend, Dennis. Do we want to go? I guess the
Let's
game
let's
starts at 3:30 today,
Yeah, we'll
Saturday.
break down these games and we'll be on the record. People, if you don't listen to this until Sunday, we recorded this Saturday morning. So we're not making
Yeah.
things up. We're not inserting things. But yeah, let's take a look at
So first
Wild
thing,
Card Weekend.
yeah, I did have time to get the efficiency, which is actual football points, yards per game per second. So speed with production, I guess, is another way to think about it. Washington number one, Dennis. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, yeah.
Houston last. So just a preview, I did a complete six, is it six? Six, no, 7 game parlay or 6 game parlay. And the only reach, I picked Washington over Tampa Bay. It may be a little aggressive, but I needed to make a little money with my $2 play. So I pretty much stayed chalky, but I reached out there. So if the chalk wins and Washington surprises, then I will hit my parlay. So that's kind of the scale. 3 bad, 3 good. The rest is kind of mediocre in the middle. And don't know if you got any comments or we can just jump into the Chargers Houston game. I don't know if you want to comment or.
Yeah, let's jump into Chargers
Okay.
and Texans. I'm very interested to see how the Daps line up in this one
Yeah.
because this is a game
Hey,
where I haven't made a decision yet.
yeah. So Houston's at home, but they're the dog. Chargers are road favorite. -3, 41. So it's one of the weaker overall productions for the weekend here. I think the high is 50. So, but the low is I think close to 41. Chargers, when they are going, they have an opportunity in Herbert, the wide receivers, Dennis, and the kicker. The tight end, I probably wouldn't play, but the running backs, okay. Quarterbacks, okay. Houston, pretty much nothing's stopping them from doing their game. Schultz might have a little bit of a tweak. You might in daily fantasy do a, a defense streamer thing here. Efficiency wise, Chargers are improving, Houston declining. They both love away. Chargers in their away love to rush more than they do at home. 12% less at home, but 12% more on the road. So I think Chargers may be rushing and being a little bit more balanced. Houston at home rushes 15% less. So they got Mixon, but their pattern, believe it or not, Dennis, is not to use him as much on away home games. That's weird. And I'm not sure that's what they should do here. Again, their efficiency last 3 has not been good. 35 versus 82.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's been sad. It's been extra sad this week. So Chargers are improving. Vegas sees that. Chargers have an advantage. They should rush a little more to balance out their passing. They just seem like the more balanced team. 3 points, everything seems Chargers, have an opportunity, but it might come down to the last possession because Houston, uh, they got some players on there.
Yeah, Houston's got some players. I think they'll score some points. I'm going to take the over in this one. That 41.5 is pretty low. It's not like I think this game is going to be in the upper 50s or, crazy scoring game because it is the playoffs. Teams tend to play a little more conservative, but I'll take the over and I'm going to take the Chargers. I have not been impressed with the Texans down the stretch. They did not finish strong, and the Chargers get back Dobbins. He looked okay. I think the Chargers will score against this Houston defense, and in my little fantasy rosters, it's interesting. Both of the games I'm in for the playoffs, I had to pick one player off of each team to put on a roster, and I get their scoring for the whole rest of the playoffs. I take Nico Collins and Lad McConkey
Yeah.
for the respective players off the Chargers and the Texans.
Yeah. That's interesting. Interesting. Okay. So that is today at 3:30. I don't even know what network it's on or whatever. Game two is tonight. Baltimore at home. Heavily favored, almost by 10 points, 31-12. So Vegas says Pittsburgh gets 3 or 4 field goals. That's it, or maybe a
Ugh.
touchdown. And yeah, it's sad. Vegas has a sad opinion of Pittsburgh. Baltimore, when have a little bit of issue, but I might play them as seem like they have a balanced situation. Pittsburgh should be able to run, but their quarterback, I don't know if Wilson can overcome a extra tough environment. The kicker and the defense might be a secret play there. You might get a little bit there. Baltimore has been not improving, declining, but Pittsburgh has been declining. Uh, Home away, Pittsburgh loves at home and they're away, Dennis.
Ugh.
Yeah, so that's not good. They pass less away, 10% less, and rush a little more. That's kind of what the DAPs are giving them, but I don't think that they're going to be able to use rushing to keep up with Baltimore. I think Baltimore just scores early, often. Baltimore at home is very balanced, Dennis. They rush and pass. And why shouldn't they, right? Given who their running back is, given their wide receivers. Of course, Flowers is not playing, but they have Andrews and, their fleet of tight ends that I think will balance out not having Flowers. So I think Baltimore should win relatively easy. I think they're the chalk of the chalk, and I put them at my parlay as well.
Yeah, I don't see the Ravens losing this. They played earlier in the year and Baltimore beat them easily. They beat them in double figures. So
Yep.
even though you look at 9.5 and you say, man, that's a lot of points in a playoff game, I will take Baltimore, give the points, and I like the under. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Steelers only get field goals. As far as my leagues where I had to pick a player off of each team,
Yep.
pick Derrick Henry off of Baltimore,
Yeah.
and I picked the Steelers kicker. That's
I could
gonna,
see that. That's actually a good play if you have to play somebody.
yeah, and
That's
it was by default because I didn't like anybody better on the Steelers at a position. Um, Flirted with Freermuth. That was it.
uh,
But only two tight ends can be picked. So I had, uh, you know, those spots taken by other players. So ended up with the kicker. All right, Sunday, we've got an interesting game because
Buffalo, Denver.
this game is really, really confusing to me when it comes to breaking this one down because I think this is going to be a lot closer than what Vegas is saying.
Vegas says 8.5 points, Dennis. They don't see it close at all. 48, 31, 32, 15. They don't think Denver does much anything. And so Buffalo, when they've got the ball, it's play them all, except the kicker. Probably wouldn't play, maybe the D. But Nix has been pretty damn good. Denver, on the other hand, has an opportunity both running and passing. Just their tight end is an issue, but it looks to me like a shootout, Dennis. If you just look at the DAPS, it's different than Vegas. So that is confusing as well. It's one of these things where the DAPS would imply lots of passing and a closer game because, if you're able to pass, look at extra easy with Cortland Sutton and what. So I'm a little tricked on that. Buffalo is and Denver have not been declining or improving, just doing about the same. Buffalo 92 in efficiency. Denver not bad at about 70. They both like away games. So Denver likes, they do 20% better in a way. So they're have an advantage being a road dog here. So that kind of adds to the luster of Denver. And Buffalo likes to actually be away. Isn't that interesting? And they're home, but nothing real. They still stay balanced, either home or away. So I I agree. I'm not buying the spread, and it wouldn't surprise me the over is the place to be here. But I'm not betting those. I'm just taking Buffalo. I think Josh Allen will run it in, and I think he can outdo Knicks. Uh, but it could be last team can win. It's going to be closer than I think Vegas is telling us it is.
Yeah, I like the 8.5 here. I'll take Denver in the 8.5. I also like the over. I both of these defenses at times. I mean, Denver shut out the junior varsity with the Chiefs, but that's been it, man. They've given up some points this year, and so has Buffalo down the stretch here. The Buffalo defense not 100% again, and their depth is awful. So I think there's some opportunities to be made, and Josh Allen and Cortland Sutton were my picks off of these squads.
That sounds good here. So Philadelphia, Green Bay, 45, 5 points, 27-17. Uh, Probably believable. I did, I was with the chalk with Philly, but I will say, look at the DAPS, Dennis. Green Bay with the rushing is the only bright spot here. So if I was playing some type of props, maybe you think if Green Bay can use their defense and hang in there, they might do well rushing here. Might surprise everybody, but you might be able to take either defense and be rewarded in any kind of props or anything. Philly is improving though, Dennis, and Philly at home is really above league average in rushing and passing. They're doing it all. And I think they have an advantage being balanced. In other words, if Green Bay, I don't think Green Bay can shut Barkley and everybody else down at the same. Something's going to be loose, right? It's like I got three or four mice here in a box, and the cat can only grab two or three, right? You put one in his mouth and two paws, there's still another mouse loose. And I believe Green Bay's defense is not that good. There's somebody in the Philly is going to get loose. It could be Barkley, and I think Philly does win. But Green Bay uh, is away. They are less efficient, Dennis. That worries me as well. 11% less rushing, 23% less passing attempts at away games. It's like Green Bay hates being away. They need their Lambeau leaps, and uh, they're not going to find that in Philly, Dennis. So I went with Philly, but as far as the spreads, I wouldn't bet any of that in the over under.
Yeah, so this is a tough game because Green Bay really hasn't beaten a good team most of the year. I mean, most of Green Bay's wins have come beaten up on the lesser teams, and when they face tough teams, they have not always done well. But you get Jalen Hurts trying to come back off of a concussion. He's going to be rusty. And then you give Green Bay the only advantage they have because Jacobs, this is the type of team that he should run well against. So I'm looking at this one and I'm saying, you know what? I like the upset here. I like Green Bay pulling off the upset on the road
Well, there goes my parlay.
in a low scoring game. So I love the under in this one. I think this is going to be the lowest scoring game of the weekend. And I think I think it's going to be a close game, and it's going to come down to turnovers. I haven't been impressed with Jalen Hurts at times this year, so I think
He did clear protocol.
cleared protocol. And even though I'm not crazy about him, he's the guy I took as my quarterback in my playoff leagues, and I took Josh Jacobs on the Green Bay side as their
Yep.
player. So
Yep.
those are the guys that I took. I have low confidence in this game, other than to say I think it will be the under. The final game on Sunday, the Commanders playing against those Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa is 28-22 minus 350. This is the husky of the huskiest games, Dennis. No squirrels here. It's all about the points. Tampa Bay should be able to pass. And have you noticed their tight end when Otten's down? They've got a tight end that we need to put on our watch list. Forgot
Payne
his name.
Durham.
Yes, yes. Have you know he's been getting a little action last
Yeah,
couple games, so I am putting him down. If maybe on the waiver wire, if Otten goes down next year, it would be, he might be worthy of a stash down the road, or maybe even a dynasty stash, down the road. Tampa Bay looks like it's all about their passing. They will be stymied in rushing, according to the DAPS. Not seeing kicker defense, nothing impresses me there. Washington is all about the tight end. Come on, Ertz. Ertz could win this game again. He could grab a touchdown and the running. Brian Robinson, is Eckler back? Maybe, yeah.
yep.
And yep. So Washington's improving. 100 efficiency versus 65. I took Washington in an upset on my parlay, Dennis. My $2 parlay. So if you're right on the Green Bay, then I'm already blown up here by Sunday night. If not, I could be still in the running for my Monday night surprise and make some money. Uh, Washington, however, is 9% less passing, rushing, and 16% less passing. So they are going to have to beat their tendency. And I'm hoping, being improving the last few games, I hope that gives them an advantage. But I may have reached a little too much there. I may get my paw slapped, and that's fine. It's only $2, Dennis. That's my wager for the weekend. I am not touching anything else. I could see it going 55 points, but I could see it maybe not reaching that. So I'm gonna let you bet those. But I am taking Washington. I like the efficiency and the improving, and I think Ertz is the key. If he has a good game, Washington could upset.
Yeah, and this is going to be an interesting game. I think this is going to be the highest scoring game of the weekend. I'll take the over here. I like the Commanders to pull
No,
off
you
the
don't.
upset.
Come on,
Yes, I
Dennis.
do. I
Oh,
do
come
like
on
the
now.
Commanders to win this one. McLaurin is my guy off the Washington team here. And as far as Tampa, I'm taking Bucky Irving. So I'm happy with him, but he
Boy,
he
he's
faces
dynamic, isn't he? Damn.
he's so dynamic and he's so much fun to watch, and he'll be good in the passing game. So I'm
Now
not
we
worried
got
about the
him on
tough
our
gap.
dynasty team. Did we ever get Bucky?
Yes,
No.
we do. Yep. We're a
That
buck.
is okay. I'll give you extra clap for that, Dennis. That was a great. Boy, I love coming into 2025 having Bucky. That seems to me that makes our draft for the rookies a lot easier because a lot of times when I was doing this by myself, I didn't felt like I had any running backs I could, and you got Chuba. I mean, I feel like we got a shot at maybe being competitive next year in our dynasty.
Yeah, I like our chances. We got Bucky Irving. We got Estime from Denver. So we've got some talent
Yeah,
there at the running back position, and we'll draft probably another running back or two, and
yeah.
and see what we can do. We've also got Vaki from the Lions. If anything happens to
Montgomery might not be
Montgomery,
there next year. Yeah,
it might end up being okay. But yeah, Bucky Irving is a guy that I was all over last year. Loved the player, didn't mind the landing position. Um, Again, Rashad White had some limitations when it came to looking at his MVP numbers. So I thought he was vulnerable and like him a lot. But yeah, I like the Commanders to upset the Bucks, but I think this is going to be a high scoring game. Monday night they moved the Rams game to Arizona.
there is
So
no
it's
home team
neutral site this weekend. So
in
it's the
Arizona.
Vikings and
Yeah.
the Rams.
Yeah, it looks like 26, 21, 2.5, 47. So basically 48. Another higher scoring game. So the good news, Dennis, for just football, we have three games, I think, above 48 and above, roughly. So that's good. I think it'll be entertaining. And, I just let you know, I did pick Minnesota. They love to be away. So I do like the neutral situation. Minnesota should be passing all day long. Justin Jefferson should collect. Lots of scoring. Addison, I think it's all good. Hawkinson will get his 8 catches, maybe a touchdown. I like Minnesota here. Not sure about the rushing though. That's a little lean. Rams also rushing's a little lean, tough. Looks like it's passing. So it looks like a passing shootout to me. And 48, that it may be higher than we think there. So again, Minnesota in a way uh, rushes 13% more. But with the DAPS, I'm not sure that's an advantage. I think they may try to rush just to keep just Jefferson spry out there running some cardio, and then second half they pepper him and he gets his 2 touchdowns here. So if I was going to stretch a prop, that might be at least a anytime touchdown scorer kind of guy here. Rams, you think Puka? That would be a double parlay. I think Puka's going to collect as well, maybe even Cup. So you might get a Puka and Justin Jefferson parlay there for anytime touchdowns. So that might be worth your time as well. I don't think the Rams are going to be able with not rushing. I don't think they have an advantage. It could go down to the last team gets it, but I had to pick one, so I took Minnesota here as the win.
Yeah, and I like Minnesota for the win in this. I think actually it's going to be a pretty comfortable win. Hard to believe, but we got two road favorites in these games
Yeah.
during wild
Yes.
card weekend. Very rare to see, but both of them I think are really solid plays. I do like this Minnesota team bouncing back from that tough loss last week. My goodness, what a buzzsaw of a team that they ran into. You know, with Detroit. But unlike Detroit, I don't think the Rams have the defense that will
Nope.
worry me here. So I look at this being a pretty lopsided game. And I think it'll be a game where we see a lot of scoring. So I've got Puka on my team for the playoffs, and I've got Hawkinson on my team for the playoffs here. So those are the guys that I'm selecting to have the best games. You know, wide receiver, yeah, Jefferson will have a good game, but there were some other guys, you know, on the other teams that I thought I better take when it came down to it, as far as that goes. But obviously, he's gonna have another big game, but should be pretty entertaining game on Monday night.
Yep.
But I do like Minnesota to prevail.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it looks like other than the Green Bay story, it looks like we're pretty much together on those. So that means we probably really lose bad, Dennis. And but that's okay. $2, I'm not going to worry about that. That's just a superfecta bet for me. So I am not worried about $2 play there at all. And last week I had a 13 game parlay and it blew up early with Chicago kicking the overtime field goal. I could not believe that happened. That was crazy. So that just sunk my big parlay there. But what do you expect for $2, right? But I got a good run for it. I enjoyed that. So
There you
anyway,
go.
Dennis, I think we're winding down this week. I know you're doing research. I think next week we're going to talk about your article. If people want to jump ahead and do their homework, we will be touching base on Dennis's kind of year-end perspective using his metrics, and he breaks down the players and makes little pithy comments, or depends on your who you're rooting for. It may not be pithy to you, maybe make you angry. But anyway, Dennis has commented on the major players and he's given you kind of a framework to think about and think about getting your data sets going and starting your own database. How about that? Is something fun? Can you imagine how much fun you'll have uh, uh, doing that? You know, folks, that's what I'll be doing. Probably 2, 3 hours a day on average. Some days more, some days less, but that's what I'm going to do, and that's fun for me.
Oh yeah, and I'll be probably having my preseason 2025 looks at by position, and of course,
Should we look at your last year's
yeah,
preseason?
we'll
We
look at
should
last
bring,
year's
maybe
as
that's
well.
what we'll do as well.
Yeah, we'll compare and see because I want to look back also and see how I did. Because grading yourself and understanding where you went wrong is
Hmm.
part of the scientific process
Oh, it
as
is.
well. And it helps you build better teams in the future. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You can check out my year end uh, after week 18
Yes.
consensus rankings, my best of the year as far as best ball index guys as well. check out the professor's defense against position data and
I'm going to
all
have
of the
this
stuff
up here in just a
to
second. Yeah.
get you ready for the playoffs, and come back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Good luck, folks. Get to work. That was
All
fun.
right. And the
Yeah.
voice lasted for the entire show.
Yeah, it was getting a little gravelly there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to shut this puppy down.